I now have the pleasure of introducing the phenomenal Annie Groth. Woohoo! Annie brings a wealth of personal experience, business expertise, and community service. She is a successful serial entrepreneur, having owned and sold 17 Quiznos and built a thriving business as a financial guide. She's a community leader who has earned many awards, such as being named an Outstanding Woman in Business by Phoenix Business Journal and Recent Hero by One Community, and founder of Pearls of Wisdom, an organization designed to help women connect mind, body, and spirit and change overall conversations about the management and future planning of money and personal finances. Today, she is going to share her life and business wisdom, as well as insights from her recent journey on El Camino. Welcome, Annie Groth.
Everybody's taller than I am. I'm just thrilled and delighted to be here. Christy, thank you so much for asking me, and I want to get this out of the way up front. There are many women sitting at tables here that could be doing this very same conversation today because you've accomplished many wonderful things. I just happened to get lucky and she asked me. So I appreciate your attention to what I'm going to share with you today, and I'd also like to thank Vanessa and Aaron for being sponsors today. And thank you all for being here. I know that you're all really busy, and I hope that you find value in what I'm about to share with you. And I'm just going to do one really quick plug. I can't help myself. Just bear with me. Here's my question. How do you wear your why? So I'm on the board of directors for the YWCA, and if you haven't checked it out recently, make it a point to do so. The CEO is here today, Regina Edwards, and she's fabulous. So that's my plug. We have an event coming up on November 4th that I'd love to see all of you there. We're honoring Dr. Gladys McGarry, who is 95 years old, will be 95. She is the mother of holistic health in this country. And she will be there being presented with an award, and we're just thrilled. So I'm going to talk about today, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And I have lived in that premise my entire life. And I will tell you, quite frankly, it has never occurred to me that I can't until I think that I can't and I get stuck. And I'll share a little bit about that as I get further along in the presentation. So if you'll notice on this screen, you'll see the Grand Canyon. You'll see me holding my bicycle above my head. And then you'll see me with my hands over my heart. And that was the beginning of the El Camino just this past September. So the first one was riding the bicycle. A friend of mine called me one weekend and said, "Annie, want to do the AIDS bicycle ride?" And I said, "Well, sure, what is it?" Sure, what is it? And she said, "It's a 545-mile bicycle ride from San Francisco to Los Angeles." I'm like, well, okay. Let's train. And so we trained, sort of. I wish I would have trained more. And so our first day, when we left San Francisco, there were 2,300 of us. And we, at that point, raised the most money that had ever been raised for that cause. We raised $13 million. The oldest person on the ride was 87 years old. I don't know if he finished it, but he certainly started it. So talk about the epitome of whether you think that you can or you can't, you're right. If you'll notice the big red ribbon up on the top of the hill, of course, that's the emblem of AIDS, HIV. So if you'll notice the round of people that are, like kind of milling around, what that is we had lunch on our first day. It was raining. We were on our way to Santa Cruz. The first day was 84 miles, and it was 84 miles of this. And some of the hills I did at about 2 miles an hour, and I made a deal with myself that if I couldn't do the hills, I would walk my bike, but I certainly wasn't going to quit. And I want to report to you that not one hill did I get off my bicycle and walk it. Thank you. So, you have a great lunch. They feed you like 3,000 to 5,000 calories a day. Because imagine what you're doing. You had to raise a minimum of $3,000 to participate, and many people raised in the tens of thousands of dollars. It was just wonderful. So if you'll notice, and I forgot my laser pointer, so I'm just going to go over here just for a second. If you notice this hill, that was after lunch. It's like, seriously, who put that hill in there after lunch? And then the next day, we had part of our ride was called the Quad Buster. So you can imagine what your quadriceps felt like. And again, it's like, I'm not getting off my bicycle. I'm going to do this. Well, that man beside me was from Brazil. And I kept watching him. And at the time when I did the AIDS bike ride, I was heavier than I am today. So you can imagine, hills are harder when you're heavier. Just heavier in your head, your heart, or your body, it's harder. So I watch him. He's going back and forth up and down the hill, and I'm like, what's this guy doing? And so he comes up next beside me, and he puts his hand in the small of my back, and he pedals me up the hill with him. Right? So that's one of the things in life that we know, if someone looks, if they need help, let's help them. And it was, I didn't even have to ask him. He just looked at me. You can kind of see how my helmet's kind of cockeyed, And I hugged him when we were finished, and I tried to find him. He is an emergency room nurse in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we could never connect again. So I hope he hears me today, because I'm still full of gratitude. The next one was a small town called Bradley, California. And this little town was so grateful that everything that the riders year after year do, it's a population of 120 people. They shut the little town down. They provide a barbecue, a massage for $20, which I gladly paid for, a burger, soda, and chips for $7. And the year prior, because of the money that they got from all the cyclists, they were able to give every student in their school a computer. And so it's really about paying it forward. And again, it's just about all the stuff that we can do, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And I think one of the most important things for me in my life is to get out of my head and get into my heart. Because when I'm in my head, every time in my head, I think of all the things I can't, I shouldn't, well, maybe next year. And the minute I get into my heart, it's just like Aaron was talking about, the whisper in your heart. My heart's 5. My heart has no idea that there are limitations in my life. So I think it's really important when you start having a back and forth in your head and you start arguing, just remember you're the only person in the room, right? So if you're arguing with yourself, get out of your head and get into your heart. The one on the bottom with me holding the bicycle over my head, that was when we were halfway to L.A. And what an exhilarating morning that was. It was one of these. And you would watch people take their jackets off, put them back on, take them off, put them back on. Some people got hypothermia. And then as we turned the corner, we saw the bridge of seals. And they greeted us with their barking. And it was magnificent. So just loved that. And so next, I just am in a field of dreams. I asked my graphic artist to take that out, and it was too much of a pain, so we left it in. But that particular day, was the shortest day of the entire ride. It was only 45 miles. And so what I did is I put on a bicycle outfit that I had never worn. Not a good idea. So I'm a Pearl Izumi Elite girl. If you're going to cycle long distances, you need Pearl Izumi Elite. And one of the things, the reason we train and the reason we practice over and over, whether it's at work, with your family, with play, the reason we practice over and over and over is so we get good at something and we learn lessons. So I'm on a 545-mile bicycle ride, and I decide that I'm going to wear something new because it's only 45 miles. I'm going to step away just again a minute. So anyway, I created a little adhesion on my bottom. And the lucky thing is they had butt clinics all along the way. So, and they were makeshift. It was in the back of a car. But thank goodness it didn't break the skin. But the lesson in that one was, listen to yourself. I knew better, and I did it anyway. How many times have we all done something that we listen, we hear that little voice, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about, I'm just going to do it anyway. And then we're like, darn it, I should have listened. Like, why did I leave my purse in the car, right? So it's just really important. That was a message that I got loud and clear, and trust me, I don't wear anything but Pearl Izumi Elite. And then that picture on the bottom, now the reason I brought this one along is because when we got to that sign, if you see that it says Los Angeles, 122 miles, you're on your bicycle, you're almost finished, and you can say to yourself, oh my God, it's only 122 miles. So realize that the journey may seem long, and sometime at some point you can recognize. And one of the things, if those of you who have had emails from me, just because you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel doesn't mean there isn't one. Sometimes you just can't see it yet. And if you know you're on the right path, you're listening to your heart, you'll get there. So there's a man whose brother died of HIV/AIDS, and underneath the balloons, he owns an ice cream shop in Santa Barbara. And his gratitude is he gave 2,300 bicycle riders whatever ice cream you wanted. Right? Again, it's about paying it forward, because he realized all the good that these big bicycle rides are doing for research and hopefully someday a cure. The last one is I was waiting for my ride. I'm waving. I was waiting for my ride, and it was like, oh, thank goodness it's over. And the bottom picture were some of the riders listening to the final speaker and really all the gratitude. And one of the things they did to end the ceremony, they brought in a bicycle without a rider with just a helmet, and for the people who couldn't. And so when we embark in life on things that we don't think they're quite that important, or maybe we could or we shouldn't or whatever, just realize that there are so many people who might want to, who can't. Be their voice, be their champion. Now let's talk about the Grand Canyon. So one day in my office, one of my clients, who at the time was 62, and I was still in my 50s, that seems like 1,000 years ago. I just turned 60 this year. But thank you. One of my clients was in my office, and I said, what have you been up to? She said, oh, I just hiked the Grand Canyon rim to rim. Well, I want to do that. Well, now keep in mind, I'm afraid of heights. I don't know how to hike. I have no idea what I'm going to get myself into, but I want to hike the Grand Canyon rim to rim. So I had a friend, and I'm like, well, can you teach me? I mean, I know you know how to hike. You're a really great hiker. And the response was, no. Well, could I go hiking with you? Okay. So there's a little trail where this all began at 32nd Street in Lincoln, and if you really want to hike with me, I'm there most days, Quartz Trail. I'm there most days at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. And the first time I did that trail, I did a quarter of it in about 45 minutes. When I finished preparing for the Grand Canyon, before I went to the Grand Canyon, I did the entire trail in 43 minutes. So I really marked my progress. And so many things happened along the way to say maybe you're not doing the right thing, maybe you shouldn't be doing the Grand Canyon. There were messages. I had a car accident that I got whiplash. Somebody turned in front of me. I broadsided them. The Grand Canyon was closed. Remember when the government closed down? The weekend we were supposed to hike it, the government closed. And so the Grand Canyon was closed. So had to train again all summer, because it's not something you just wake up and do tomorrow. You have to train. You have to know what to eat, the nutrition. You have to know the electrolytes. You have to know the amount of water, this, that, and the other thing. So trained again. And I had a goal because some people told me that, it's probably not a good idea that you go with that group because you'll probably hold them back. Seriously? So this is certainly not my saying, but I'm going to steal it. Tell a woman or tell me that I can't, and you watch me show you how it's done. So that group, I watched them. They did the Grand Canyon hike in 14 hours. I want you to know that I completed mine in 12 hours and 10 minutes. Now, you can applaud me. I'll applaud myself for that. But the fault in that is, I'll show you. But what I missed was, I was in one of the most sacred places on the face of this earth, one of the 7 wonders of the world, and I got out of the Grand Canyon and said, yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I said, no, you didn't. One of the women that I run into at the 32nd Street and Lincoln hike in the morning, she said, oh, I did that. Did you see the Phantom at Phantom Ranch? What? What do you mean Phantom at Phantom Ranch? I didn't even know there was a Phantom. So my message in that is don't hurry too much through the process. Enjoy the process of it. Enjoy the journey rather than the destination. So this one I wanted to point out to you. The first time I hiked the Grand Canyon, this is the Bright Angel Trail, and you come down here, and you go down to Indian Garden, and then you go out here to the end of here, and that's halfway to the bottom. And so the first time I did that, it took me about 8 hours just to do that little piece. And so it was really about marking the progress. This picture of me standing beside the sign that says Cathedral Rock, the first time I went to do that hike with one of those same friends, remember, I'm afraid of heights, it was near my birthday, and we got to that hike, and I got about a quarter of the way up and stopped, sat down, and cried. Crocodile tears. Couldn't do it. I saw 5-year-olds scampering up like there was nobody's business. I couldn't do it. Remember, I can't. So I made a decision that year, that the following year on my birthday, that I was going to go hike that. And that's me with my hands raised in the air, that I hiked that hike and that I did that. And then the next part, again, is how do you wear your why? That was me this year, getting ready for the El Camino and hiking that again. The picture on the right is me hiking Thompson Peak. Has anybody ever hiked Thompson Peak? A couple of people in the room. That's a tough hike. The incline on that hike is so tough that part of the way up they had to put concrete so the trucks could get up to the top to work on the antennas. You can see it. It's off the 101 with the antennas on the right. And again, it's about getting out of your head and getting into your heart. This was me finishing the Grand Canyon, my 12 hours and 10 minutes. And I got to tell you, there was no better feeling in the world than to be done with that. We got, it's 7 miles down, 10 miles across, and 7 miles up. And of course, you're in altitude, and I mean 7 miles up. And when we finished with the 7 miles down, the small bone on the outside of my leg, Dr. Gladys could tell me, Kara could probably tell me what that bone is, had popped out slightly. So I walked that entire hike with that bone popped out, but there was nothing that was going to get in my way. Nothing. So this is the finale of getting ready to get ready to go to France and Spain. And so this is, again, paying attention and the people that come into your life. So recently this year, as Christy mentioned, I was honored by the Phoenix Business Journal, and I met a lot of the other honorees. And I'd met a woman on an airplane with a little dog named CJ. And so we struck up a conversation, and she was having a women's luncheon at Wells Fargo, and she said, we'd love for some of the honorees to come. And so this other woman who's pictured with me, her name is also Annie, was there again, and she asked me, what are you doing this fall? And I said, I'm going to go walk the El Camino, and her eyes just got bigger and bigger, and she said, I've always wanted to do that. And I said, well, come on. So I actually had company with me because I was going to do the El Camino by myself. And ladies, I know there are a lot of rumors swirling around that it's not safe. I couldn't think that that's any further from the truth. I never felt in harm's way, including, they warn you when you're in France and Spain, especially Spain, watch out for pickpockets. Never once did I feel like someone was going to do anything that they shouldn't be. This is Gumby and my journal, getting ready for the El Camino. And Gumby, I'm going to give you one of my first book recommendations. For those of you who know me, I'm an avid, voracious reader. Walking Home by Sonia Choquette, really a magnificent book. I would go to bed late. I would set my alarm at 4:30 so I could read 30 minutes before I got up. And her little friend that she took with her on the El Camino was Gumby. So I bought Gumby to take with me. My pedicure person, I had her put the scallop shells on my toenails, and I'm going to pass this shell around. These shells, back in the 800s ADs, that's how many centuries people have been doing the Camino, these shells represented something really, really important. If during the Spanish Inquisition and other wars on the El Camino, if you had one of these shells somewhere on your person, they wouldn't bother you because they knew you were a pilgrim. And they were also used for water out of the streams, and also if you wanted to put your food in one of these, this is what they used. And this shell went with me all the way through the El Camino. And then me on the airplane. Okay, it's time to go. So the first place I went, I did. I'll get to it. Thank you for asking. So one of my dreams that I began to dream when I was 22 years old, I saw a movie, and I'm going to say this is the truth, and it may not be, and if anybody's a movie buff, please don't correct me. Because it's been a story I've told myself for a long time. Glenda Jackson and George Segal did a movie called A Touch of Class. And they were having an affair. They went to a restaurant in France called Maxime's. And when I was 22 years old, I bought a little brass container that I've had with me in all of my moves, all of my life, that is engraved with Maxime's. I'm going to go to that restaurant one of these days. So the first thing that we did when we got there, we went to, it was late in the afternoon. We were tired. It had stormed in Paris that day. But we stopped at Tuileries Gardens. That's me walking in Tuileries Gardens with my shoes off in the damp grass. We stopped at a little cafe, and ladies, I got to tell you, if you've never been there, make sure that you order the hot chocolate. It is thick enough to stand your spoon up in. It is to die for. And the server had watched me pick up one of the leaves off the ground. And again, it's about paying attention. She brought over to me this fuzzy ball. It was a green fuzzy ball, and she cut it in half. She didn't speak English, and my French is non-existent. And so she opened it up, and what she gave me was a chestnut because she'd seen me pick up the leaf. And again, it's really about appreciating the small things in life. The Eiffel Tower, it was a disappointment because we had reservations at Jules Verne, and that day with the storm in Paris, something had blown off the Eiffel Tower. We got there for dinner, and we couldn't get in. And so, you have to let those things go. The concierge tried to get us in the next day. They didn't show up, and it wasn't our fault, but the security wouldn't let us in. And again, it's about making sure to get out of your heart and into your head. This little statue comes into Maxime's when you first go in. The restaurant was built in 1838. Now, I don't think it's been refreshed since the 1900s, but I will tell you, the food is absolutely spectacular. French waiters in their ties and their tuxes, and they made me a chocolate souffle for dessert, and I asked them for a menu, and I took a menu home, and I just hung it in my house. I just had it framed. Don't believe everything that you hear. Remember when they told us in the news that the locks of love, you couldn't put them on the bridge anymore on the Seine? Well, I don't really believe much I'm told. I have to go see for myself. And so fortunately, people had begun to put padlocks on there again, and I bought my padlock and put it on the locks of love. Of course, the Mona Lisa, if I never go back to the Louvre, it'll be too soon. Hordes and hordes and hordes of people. People who don't, we have personal space. It doesn't exist. And there were 2 teenagers, I'm not kidding, who could make this up in front of the Mona Lisa. And I think they probably took about 20 selfies and would not move out of the front of the Mona Lisa. So that's as close as I could get to her. And then the little dancer. I have loved Degas' work for decades. And I had seen the little dancer at the Met in New York. Now, I don't know about you. I had no idea that there were many replicas of the little dancer. Well, when you're in the Louvre, you get to see the original. And that's the original Degas' little dancer. And I happened to pop into a neighborhood art gallery, and I found a replica of the little dancer with her little linen skirt and her little top, which now is in my home as well. And then you can't miss the Eiffel Tower, all sparkly. They do it once an hour at night until 11 o'clock at night, and it's just spectacular. And then one of my besties, we ran into each other in Paris. Jill's my friend. She's here. She was there with a company trip, and then she and her husband spent about a month doing a wine tour in Europe. And we ran into each other in the hotel and shared a few minutes. Both of us were exhausted, but gosh, what a treat to be halfway around the world and run into one of your besties. Now, this, has anybody in here ever hiked the Grand Canyon? I just want to back up a minute. Do you remember the Silver Bridge in the Grand Canyon that allows you to go over over the water, the Colorado? That bridge has 122 tons of material, and how are you going to get it down there? 52 Havasupai tribesmen carried each one of those 550-foot suspension cables down one by one, and they weighed 2 tons each. So if you ever get an opportunity to go to the Grand Canyon, make sure that you really appreciate that Silver Bridge. What this is indicative of right here, these relics that you're seeing, and this piece here too, one of the things they discovered in Barcelona were 2,000-year-old Roman ruins underneath the city of Barcelona. Yeah, really, really something. It's just, and it's in pristine condition, the way that they've kept that. So if you ever get to Barcelona, and again, it's about appreciating what was, not just what is. And so many times we just want to move on to next, but it's really important to honor what was. So I don't eat pork. I haven't eaten pork in 12 years. Well, in Spain, they have a pig. It's called an Iberico pig. And all they feed it are acorns. It is 100 euros per kilo, or for us, $100 a pound. Well, I'm certainly not going to go to Spain and not try it. There is a package in my refrigerator as we speak. I've got to tell you, it's remarkable. The taste is not like anything you've ever tasted in your life, but that's about getting out of my head and into my heart. Because I have spent many years of my life turning my nose up at things. Oh, I'm not going to do that. That's icky. I'm not going to do that. And why would I travel all that way not to try it? So I made the decision to try it. And then just the Boqueria in Barcelona, you can see how they display their wares. It's just spectacular. So these pictures are kind of out of sequence. These were Annie and I's feet the night before we got ready to go. We had dipped our toes in the Mediterranean. And just so you know, the shoreline in Barcelona is man-made. They made it for the 1996 Olympics, and they are still proud to be the only modern-day profitable Olympics in the world. And so this picture of me standing on a chair, we stayed in a couple of hostels called albergues, and It was the only day that it rained and it misted and we were cold and we walked too far that day. We actually had to come back. We get to our albergue. Of course, it's upstairs with Cheater. And really heavy bags. So we had our bags transported every day, except for our day pack that we would take. We get up to the room. The shower head's out of the shower. The water's tepid. The room is cold. I go downstairs. Now, you're in Spain. They don't care. They don't care. I say the room's cold. We turn the heat on at 7:15. Oh, my gosh. You couldn't even get warm. But again, I wasn't going to let anything ruin the experience. So this is the beginning of the walk. This is a mural in Sarria, Spain. Now, you can do many segments or you can do the whole thing. I chose not to do the whole thing because I didn't want to take 30-plus days. We did 117 kilometers. 100 kilometers is the minimum that you can do in order to get your pilgrim's certificate. And so I decided to start in Sarria, Spain. And when you start in Sarria, it's 117 kilometers. And you have to get pilgrim's stamps twice a day to prove that you had started in the morning and ended in the evening. And that's Annie and I getting ready to start. And that's Annie at the beginning of the sign in Sarria to get started on the walk. This next piece that's the first sign that we saw in Sarria. And by the way, this background picture is a picture that I took in Musia, which I will talk about in a little bit as well. I couldn't capture the beauty. I tried as much as I could, but what I really loved was this little rock that I saw that looks like in the shape of a heart. And it wasn't the only one that we saw on the walk. And again, I just said to Annie, I said, oh my gosh, love is everywhere. It just doesn't matter. And so this next piece is, those are grain sheds and meat sheds, and those are where people dry their grains and their meat. It was just amazing to see those, and the reason there aren't any stairs is so the animals can't get into it over the winter. And this was into our second day, and if you'll notice the fog in that bottom right picture, every single day we were greeted with unimaginable beauty of fog that you would see only in a movie. And just being so grateful. And there were so many people on the journey, and when you would ask them, why are you doing the El Camino, the answer was universal: because I had to. I had to. And it didn't matter from Germany, the Dominican Republic, Japan, China. It didn't matter. The good thing is if you try to speak someone else's language, people are really forgiving that you're from America and speak only English. If you try to speak their language, they'll help you. It was just really remarkable what happened. And so we were in our third day in the walk. Well, here's another delicacy in Melide, Spain, octopus. I'm a finicky eater, so I'm not going to go 6,000 miles, 10,000 miles. So you can see my face there. I couldn't decide if I was going to spit it out, chew it, swallow it. I decided to swallow. Annie asked me, she said, what does it taste like? And I couldn't resist. I said, chicken. And then I watched the men from Barcelona at the end of the table eating theirs, and they were eating it skin and all. I had cut the skin off, and so I thought, you got to do it the way they're doing it. And Annie said, well, and I said, well, it's all right if you can get past the suction cups. So I will eat it again, just not with the skin. I have to hurry. Christy told me I have about 5 minutes left. This is a young woman that I met from Germany. You can hire her. She's a chemical engineer getting her master's. A really delightful young woman. We've become friends on Facebook, and she's just delightful. And I told her, I said, when you come to the United States, you sure have a place to stay. And she, really? Yes. You know, so I asked her why she did it. She did the whole thing, and she said, in Germany, when you're a girl or a boy, you live with your parents till you don't. And she said, I didn't want them to think of me as a little girl anymore. You can't really see it on the pickup, but the license plate is LUVE. It's just everywhere. And then this particular church was from the 12th century. So many churches. This was the cobblestone outside of the church with St. James cross and with the shell. And this priest told me after I took his picture that the stamp that he stamped our passport with that day was over 200 years old. Imagine. This is the piece that I pulled out of the basket that day. I love this. For wherever your treasure is, there will your heart be too. And isn't that the truth? When you're in where you're supposed to be, your heart will be there. This is Musia. Musia is a coastal town. It's Costa de Morta. And the reason it's called Coast of Death is because so many shipwrecks have happened there. In 2002, a shipwreck that dumped 66 tons of oil on that pristine coastline. This was one of the hardest parts of the trip. There was a covered wagon with, I guess, tourists in it, and had gotten stuck that day of the rain. And there was a man, and I'm sorry to tell this part of the story, but it's really important. His Arabian horse was being fussy, as Arabian horses are. And, you've got pilgrims coming at you on foot, on bicycle, you've got people, and he balled his hand up and hit that horse as hard as he could in the neck. And I screamed at him at the top of my voice, "No bueno." And so the horse starts fussing around again, and he did it again, and I screamed at him again, "No bueno." And I took off walking as fast as I could, but the hardest part about that, I was in a sea of people, and I was the only one that said anything. Why? Speak up. If you see an injustice, speak up. Because if we just let it be, we'll never change anything. Now, I may never have changed him, but at least I said something. We found a wishbone on the trail, made a wish. I loved it, that piece of rock was there, or wood. This is the marker. These are the markers, what they look like. And this one is at Musia, and it says 0 kilometers, which means you're at the end of the earth by the sea. This was one of the crosses. There were crosses all along the way, and you would put a rock on top of the cross. I loved the little ballerina flowers. I just saw the beauty everywhere. This young man with his back to you was making the pilgrim's breakfast is 2 pieces of white toast, a container of butter, jelly, and freshly squeezed orange juice, except at this place we got to walk out in their courtyard and pick fresh grapes. This was significant, the picture in the middle especially. Take those things and leave them that no longer serve you. Now, I don't know about any other woman in this room. I didn't have a really good relationship with my mother. And she's not here any longer. But before I left my home, I went to the altar in my home and I picked up my mother's rosary and took it with me. I wasn't really sure why. But when we turned a corner on our way, the last turn in Santiago, there was a fence of crosses. And I knew in that instant that I would leave my mother's rosary there and ask that she please rest in peace and for me to leave it. And it felt so cleansing to finally be able to do that. This was a woman outside washing her clothes. That's where she was doing her laundry. This was significant, the rose and the shell. People all along the way marked their fences. They marked everything. Pilgrims are so welcome everywhere. You see that woman walking down the stairs sideways? It was really painful, those last steps to go into the courtyard. This is me with my certificate. And thank you. Thank you. I actually had someone translate that from Latin to English, and I know Christy's going to get mad at me because we have to get out of here, but just bear with me. I can't find it. But anyway, it was just a congratulations, and you had your choice. Did you do the Camino spiritually, religiously, or just because? And I told them I did mine spiritually and religious for religious reasons, and you got 2 different certificates. And that was Jen at the end with Annie and I. Catalonia, which is a part of Barcelona, we're voting for their independence from Barcelona. And please realize the privilege that we have to vote. We met so many people on the trail, had to be home on Sunday because they had to vote. They wouldn't miss it. Catalonia voted for their independence. Unfortunately, it didn't pass by 50%. These rocks in Musia were used back in the centuries to tell someone's guilt or innocence, the way the rocks tipped. It's just a spectacular place. This actually is water, and the water was so clear that I didn't take one seashell from that place because I thought everybody was still living. When you're in Finisterre, well, actually, I want to talk about this. These are the largest pieces of granite ever unearthed. They're 30 feet tall. They weigh, I think, 400 or 600 tons. And the sculpture was done to represent, there were 66 tons of oil spilled in one of the shipwrecks in 2002. And it's called The Wound. And so that was his idea, to create the wound. When you get to Finisterre, you're supposed to burn something that no longer serves you. I had a hiking shirt that had a lot of memories of the Grand Canyon, and you couldn't keep up and this and that. And it's like, it's time to let that go. So I burned that shirt. This painting, let me just go back. This painting was important to me because of the message, and I'll read it to you. It was a country in the middle of all countries, made out of people from every place who spoke every language. It was an immense community, evolving, getting lost in memory, and always walking towards the sun, or towards the west like the sun does. This one was in a small community outside of Musia. There was a waterfall that fed all the electricity to all the villages. And this woman in the red, she's sitting there crocheting. And one of my sadnesses was that I asked her if I could take her picture, and she was so gracious. I didn't buy anything from her. However, most of the time in life, we don't get do-overs. I met another young woman who was from Santiago, and I Facebooked her the other day, and I said, if I send you money, will you please go buy something from her? And she agreed. So I'll get to do that one over. So it's important in our lives, if there's something that speaks to you that you think I should do that, go ahead and do it. There's this place in Spain. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The best hot chocolate that you can have in your entire life. I only bought one box. One of the women who was recently at Pearls of Wisdom is going back. I asked her to bring me back 10. So my last shot today, again, I couldn't capture the beauty. That's me with my back walking into one of the beautiful forests. And I said to Annie, I said, a road traveled by many and understood by few. And that's what the Santiago is. I'm not sure that I'll ever understand. I know some of the lessons that I continuously am being fed, the things that I think. Some are kind of screwy, some are not. But I know that they'll continue to be fed. Do we have 2 minutes for Q&A? 2 minutes. Anybody? Questions? No? Yes? In the book, Walking Home, Sonia Choquette was the author, and she brought a lot of stuff with her to the Camino, as I did too. I brought way too much, but it's a big cheater bag, and so you call it the cheater because somebody else transports it for you. You just take what you need in your day pack, so she called it cheater. I called mine cheater. Annie brought more than I did. She called hers the beast. Any other questions? I just would encourage all of you, if you've ever thought about doing it, ask me questions, call me, email me. I'm also going to start a hiking group for women. And if you'd like to learn how to hike, never thought you could, and I will tell you, think you want to lose some weight, it's a great way to do it. It's a great way to get in shape because you get your aerobic as well. You get your cardio, as well as your mindfulness and your quietness and being out in nature. It has been my pleasure to be here, and I hope that my message resonates with you, and thank you very much for having me. Thank you.